The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a sound like thunder. Ambassador Daeho Kim walked through them for what he knew would be the last time. His black diplomatic uniform bore the symbols of Earth, but today those symbols felt heavy on his chest. Behind him walked Captain Sora Park, her military dress uniform crisp and clean. She had removed all the alien medals and honors that once decorated her jacket. Today, she wore only human insignia. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from hundreds of worlds. The ceiling stretched up so high it disappeared into shadows. Around the circular floor, the three major alien powers sat in their designated areas. Each group looked down at the humans from elevated platforms as they always had. On the left sat the Vrex delegation. Their reptilian faces showed no emotion, but their red eyes followed every human movement. Chairman Veltar, their leader, was the size of a small building. His scaled hide was dark green, and scars covered his massive arms. The Vrex were warriors, and they respected only strength. They had never thought much of humans, seeing them as weak and soft. To the right, the Quillen merchants arranged themselves in perfect rows. Their insect-like bodies clicked and chittered as they whispered among themselves. Merchant Prince Zeth sat at their center, his forearms constantly moving as he calculated numbers on his personal device. The Quillens cared only about profit and trade. They saw humans as useful for labor, but nothing more. Directly ahead, the Nethys delegation floated in their energy suits. Their bodies were made of pure light, contained within glowing armor. Elder Scientist Kix led them, his form shifting between blue and white colors. The Nethys believed they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. They thought human science was simple and crude, though sometimes they found human ideas amusing. Daeho walked to the center of the chamber. The speaking platform rose from the floor as he approached. Sora took her position beside him, her hand resting on her sidearm, not because she expected trouble, but because old habits die hard. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, Daeho began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. I come before you today to deliver a message from the United Earth government. Chairman Veltar's massive head tilted slightly. Speak quickly, human. We have important matters to discuss today. Daeho smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Indeed you do. Because after today you will be discussing them without us. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant clicking of the Quillen calculator stopped. For 50 years, Daeho continued, humanity has served on this council. We have offered our ideas, our technology, our solutions to galactic problems. We have sent our best minds to work alongside yours. We have bled and died in wars that were not our own, to protect planets we had never seen. Merchant Prince Zeth's mandibles clicked impatiently. Yes, yes. And you have been well compensated for your services. What is your point? Our point, Sora said, stepping forward, is that we are tired of being treated like servants in our own house. Elder Scientist Kix's form flickered brighter. Elaborate on this concern, Captain Park. Sora's jaw tightened. Last month, when the Vrex wanted to attack the Zephyr colonies, who stopped the war before it started? Human negotiators. When the Quillen trade routes were being attacked by pirates, who designed the patrol strategies that ended the raids? Human tacticians. When the Nethys couldn't figure out how to stop the quantum plague on Zerion Prime, who solved the problem in 3 days? Human scientists. And yet, Daeho added, when decisions are made in this council, human votes count for less than any of yours. When new technologies are shared, humans receive the smallest portions. When trade agreements are written, human worlds get the worst deals. Chairman Veltar's laugh was like rocks grinding together. You complain about your treatment, yet you continue to serve. This suggests you are content with your position. We were patient, Daeho said. We hoped things would change. We believed that if we proved our worth, we would be treated as equals. But we were wrong, Sora finished. The three alien leaders exchanged glances. They had heard human complaints before. Usually a few small concessions would quiet them down for another year or two. What exactly are you proposing? Merchant Prince Zeth asked, already calculating the costs of whatever demands the humans might make. Daeho reached into his jacket and pulled out a crystal data chip. He held it up for all to see. This contains every piece of technology, every scientific discovery, every tactical innovation that humanity has shared with the Galactic Council over the past 50 years. Consider it our final gift. He placed the chip on the speaking platform. It glowed softly in the chamber's light. Effective immediately, Deho announced. Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We are ending all diplomatic relations with member species. We are recalling all human advisors, scientists, engineers, doctors, and military personnel from alien worlds. The silence stretched for long seconds. Then Chairman Veltar began to laugh again. You think this threatens us? You believe we cannot function without human assistance? We will find replacement workers easily enough, Merchant Prince Zeth added. Human labor was efficient but not irreplaceable. Elder Scientist Kix remained quiet, but his form was flickering more rapidly now. We don't think it threatens you, Sora said calmly. We know it doesn't, because you've never bothered to understand what we actually do. Deho nodded toward the data chip. Everything is in there. Every solution we've provided, every crisis we've prevented, every innovation we've contributed. You're welcome to study it. Try to understand how it all works. This is foolishness, Chairman Veltar growled. You cannot survive without the protection and trade the Council provides. We've survived worse things than being alone, Sora replied. Besides, we won't be alone for long. What does that mean? Elder Scientist Kix asked, speaking for the first time since the humans had begun their announcement. Deho and Sora exchanged a look. It means that human space is bigger than you think, and human technology is more advanced than you realize. You've only seen what we chose to share. Impossible, Merchant Prince Zeth chittered. Our trade monitors track all human industrial capacity. We know exactly what you produce. You know what we produce in the systems you monitor, Sora corrected. But humans have been exploring space for a long time. We've found things, built things, learned things. You're bluffing, Chairman Veltar declared. Perhaps, Deho said. I suppose you'll find out. He touched a control on his wrist. Across the galaxy, every human ship, every human station, every human outpost received the same signal at the same instant. The withdrawal had begun. All human personnel will be evacuated within 72 hours, Deho announced. After that, any communication attempts will be ignored. We wish you well in your future endeavors. The two humans turned and walked toward the chamber doors. Behind them, the alien delegates began shouting questions and demands. But Deho and Sora didn't look back. As they reached the doors, Elder Scientist Kix's voice cut through the noise. Ambassador Kim, you are making a mistake. The galaxy is a dangerous place for isolated species. Deho paused at the threshold. You're right, Elder Kix, the galaxy is dangerous. But we've learned something in our 50 years of service, and what is that? Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is thinking you don't need help when you actually do. The doors closed behind them with a final, echoing boom. In the chamber, the three alien powers were left staring at a glowing data chip that contained the sum of human contribution to galactic civilization. None of them bothered to pick it up. 3 months had passed since the human ships disappeared from galactic space. At first, the alien powers had barely noticed their absence. Life went on as usual across thousands of worlds. Trade continued, armies marched, and scientists worked in their laboratories. The Galactic Council had even started meeting more efficiently without human representatives asking uncomfortable questions. But then the problems began. Dr. Woojin Choi sat in his new laboratory aboard the research station New Sol, hidden deep in the void between, a region of space that most aliens considered impossible to navigate. The station was one of dozens that humanity had built in secret over the past 20 years, preparing for this day. Through the viewport, he could see the swirling energies that made this space so dangerous to alien ships. But human vessels moved through it like fish through water. On his desk, emergency broadcasts from Quillen space played on repeat. A plague had started on their trade world of Merchant's Rest 3 weeks ago. It wasn't killing anyone, but it was making the entire population too sick to work. For a species that measured success by productivity, this was a disaster. Woojin had seen this plague before. It was a mutated version of Velen fever, something that had threatened human colonies 15 years ago. Back then, he had developed a treatment in just 2 days. The cure was simple, a modified antibiotic that human doctors now carried as standard equipment. The Quillen broadcasts grew more desperate each day. Their medical technology, so advanced in some ways, couldn't handle this particular combination of symptoms. They had tried everything their science could suggest. Nothing worked. Computer accessed the medical files we shared with the Quillen Health Council in 2387, Woojin said. The information appeared on his screen. There it was, a complete breakdown of how to treat Velen fever and its mutations. The humans had given this information freely to all council members 5 years ago, but as he read through the data, Wu Jin realized the problem. The cure wasn't just about the medicine. It required understanding how human immune systems fought the disease, then adapting that approach to other species. The Quillans had taken the basic formula, but had never learned the underlying principles. They had copied the solution without understanding the problem. Now they were facing a mutation that their copied cure couldn't handle. Typical, Wu Jin muttered, switching off the broadcast. Meanwhile, in another part of space, Colonel Minho Song watched his tactical displays. From the bridge of the stealth ship, Busan, the screens showed a Vrex fleet in full retreat from what should have been an easy victory against the rebellious Keth. Worlds, the Vrex had always been excellent warriors, but they fought in predictable patterns. Human military advisors had spent decades teaching them new strategies, showing them how to adapt their tactics to different enemies. The Vrex had learned these lessons well, but they had never understood why the changes worked. Minho studied the battle recordings. The Keth forces were using formations that perfectly countered traditional Vrex attacks, but more than that, they seemed to know exactly how the Vrex would respond to every situation. It was as if they had studied Vrex military doctrine and found all the weaknesses. They're fighting like humans would fight, Minho said to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Hyojin Park. Sir, look at those movements. The Keth are using human anti-Vrex strategies. Someone taught them our methods. Minho wasn't surprised. 3 months ago, when humanity had withdrawn from galactic affairs, they had taken more than just their people. They had also taken their knowledge. But knowledge has a way of spreading, especially when desperate people start looking for solutions. The Keith had clearly found some human military files and learned how to beat the Vrex. Without human advisors to help them adapt, the Vrex were fighting the same way they always had, and that made them predictable. The Vrex are about to lose another world, Hyojin observed. Good, Minho replied. Maybe now they'll understand what they lost. Far from the battlefields in the pristine laboratories of Nethys Prime, elder scientist Kix stared at a problem that made no sense. A spatial anomaly had appeared near their industrial world of Thought's Edge. The anomaly was growing, and if it continued, it would consume the entire planet. Kix had assembled the greatest Nethys minds to solve this crisis. They had run calculations for weeks, trying every approach their advanced science could suggest. Nothing worked. The anomaly followed no patterns they understood. Show me the human data again, Kix told his assistant. The holographic display showed the crystal chip that the humans had left behind. 3 months ago, Kix had been the only council member to actually examine its contents. What he found had disturbed him greatly. The chip didn't just contain human contributions to galactic science. It contained something far more troubling, a complete record of problems that humans had identified and solved. Without telling anyone, there were asteroid deflection calculations for threats the aliens had never detected, climate models that predicted and prevented ecological disasters, viral mutation projections that had guided medical research for decades. In each case, humans had quietly fixed problems before they became crises. And now, looking at the spatial anomaly, Kix found something that chilled his energy-based form to its core. 3 years ago, human physicist Professor Yunji Kang had published a paper on spatial stability in regions with high quantum flux. The paper had been filed away and forgotten. The math was considered too crude for serious Nethys attention. But Professor Kang's calculations perfectly described the anomaly that was about to destroy Thought's Edge. Computer, locate Professor Yunji Kang, Kix commanded. Professor Kang's current location is unknown. All human scientific personnel disappeared from monitored space 87 days ago. Kix's form flickered with frustration. The solution to their crisis existed, but the person who understood it was gone. The humans had tried to share their knowledge, but the aliens had ignored it as primitive nonsense. Now that knowledge was beyond their reach, across the galaxy, smaller problems were adding up to bigger ones. Trade routes that had run smoothly for decades suddenly became conflict zones, as human negotiators were no longer there to mediate disputes. Shipping schedules that had seemed automatic began falling apart without human logistics coordinators to handle unexpected problems. On the Virex world of Stone's victory, General Gorth stared at casualty reports that made no sense. His armies were losing battles they should have won easily. Enemies were predicting Vrex strategies with impossible accuracy. Morale was collapsing as soldiers began to believe their tactics were fundamentally flawed. What Gorth didn't know was that for 30 years, human advisors had been quietly fixing weaknesses in Vrex military doctrine. They had taught the Vrex new formations, new strategies, new ways of thinking about warfare. But they had done it so subtly that the Vrex thought these improvements were their own ideas. Now, without human insight, the Vrex were back to their old patterns, and their enemies had learned how to exploit those patterns. In Quillen commercial centers, merchant Prince Zeth watched his trading empire suffer its first losses in decades. Supply chains that had run like clockwork were breaking down. Negotiations that should have been simple were failing spectacularly. Market predictions that had always been accurate were proving completely wrong. Zeth had never realized how much human input went into Quillen commercial success. Human economists had provided market analysis. Human negotiators had smoothed over cultural misunderstandings. Human engineers had optimized shipping routes and warehouse systems. The Quillens had taken credit for all of it, believing their superior business instincts were responsible for their success. Now they were learning how much of their superior instincts had actually been human wisdom. As the months passed, the cracks in galactic civilization grew wider. Each species began experiencing problems they had never faced before. Equipment failed in ways that made no sense. Negotiations broke down over misunderstandings that seemed trivial. Scientific projects ground to a halt when researchers encountered obstacles they couldn't overcome. And through it all, the humans remained silent. Their ships didn't appear on any sensors. Their communications didn't reach any receivers. They had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. The alien powers sent diplomatic missions to human space, but they found nothing. The colonies were abandoned. The space stations were empty. Even Earth itself seemed deserted, though sensor readings suggested someone was still there. Every attempt to make contact failed. The humans had disappeared into the darkness between the stars, taking with them 50 years of accumulated knowledge about how to make galactic civilization actually work. The council members were beginning to realize they had a problem, but they were too proud to admit it, and too ignorant to understand how deep the problem really was. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about the difference between using someone's help and understanding why that help was necessary. 6 months after the humans vanished, Admiral Seung Hwan Park stood on the command deck of the battleship Incheon, watching through the viewport as reality twisted around them. The void between was beautiful in its own terrifying way. Streams of dark energy flowed like rivers through space, while gravity waves created whirlpools of bent starlight. This was humanity's new home, hidden in a region of space that alien science considered impossible to enter. Their ships would be torn apart by the gravitational forces here. But human vessels, built with technologies the aliens had never bothered to study, moved through the chaos like it was calm water. Admiral, we're receiving the latest intelligence reports from the monitoring stations, announced communications. Officer Taejin Lee, display them, Seung Hwan ordered. The holographic screens around the bridge lit up with data from across the galaxy. What they showed was chaos on a scale that shocked even the human officers who had predicted this outcome. 17 separate wars had broken out in the past month alone. Trade had collapsed by 60% across all major routes. Technological development had stopped completely in many sectors as research projects failed without human input. Look at this, said Intelligence Chief Young-Soo Kim, pointing to a tactical display. The Vrexketh conflict has spread to 12 systems. The Quillen Trade Federation is fighting 3 separate wars over shipping rights. Even the Nethys have military units deployed against rebels on 4 of their worlds. Seung Hwan studied the displays with growing amazement. How are they managing to fight so many wars at once? They're not, Young-Soo replied. These aren't coordinated campaigns. Each species is thrashing around, trying to solve problems with force because they don't know any other way. For 50 years, human negotiators had prevented exactly these kinds of conflicts. When tensions rose between species, humans had stepped in with solutions that let everyone save face. When trade disputes threatened to become shooting wars, Human mediators had found compromises that satisfied all parties. The aliens had never learned these skills themselves. They had relied on humans to handle the difficult work of actually getting along with each other. "Show me the Quillen situation," Xiang Huan said. The display shifted to show Quillen space, where the merchant princes were facing a crisis that threatened their entire civilization. Their economy-based society was designed for constant growth and profit. But with trade routes collapsing and production falling, they were experiencing something they had no cultural tools to handle: widespread economic failure. Dr. Bora Shin, monitoring the situation from her research station in the void, had been tracking Quillen distress signals for weeks. The insect-like aliens were in a panic. Their perfectly organized society was coming apart as supply chains failed and markets crashed. "They're offering us anything we want," Bora reported to Admiral Park during their daily briefing. "Full technology sharing, exclusive trade deals, even territorial concessions. They just want human logistics experts to fix their supply problems." And the Vrex? Getting desperate. General Gorth is the third commander they've replaced this month. Their traditional tactics aren't working against anyone anymore. Yesterday they lost their major fortress world of Iron's Gate to a force 1/10 their size. The Vrex were learning a painful lesson about the difference between being strong and being effective. Their warrior culture had always emphasized individual combat skills and direct assault tactics. Human advisors had taught them subtlety, patience, and strategic thinking. Without those lessons, they were reverting to their old ways, and their old ways were getting them killed. "What about the Nethys?" Xiong Huan asked. Bora's expression darkened. "That's the worst situation of all. They've lost 3 worlds to spatial anomalies in the past month. Their science can't explain what's happening, let alone stop it. The Nethys were facing a crisis that cut to the heart of their identity. They believed themselves to be the most advanced beings in the galaxy, the masters of cosmic forces and quantum mechanics, but now they were encountering phenomena that their science couldn't handle. Elder scientist Kix had spent months trying to understand the spatial anomalies that were consuming Nethys worlds. The mathematics involved were beyond anything in their databases. But in the human data chip, he had found references to theoretical work that seemed relevant, research by Professor Yunji Kang and her team on quantum stability in high-energy regions. The problem was that the Nethys had never bothered to understand the foundations of human mathematics. They had dismissed human equations as primitive approximations, useful for simple engineering but inadequate for real science. Now they were discovering that human primitive mathematics could describe phenomena that Nethys, advanced science, couldn't explain. Kix had ordered his best mathematicians to study the human research, but they were struggling with concepts that seemed alien to their way of thinking. Human science approached problems differently, using intuitive leaps and creative insights. That Nethys logic found chaotic and unstructured. It's not just their mathematics. One researcher had reported to Kix. It's their entire approach to reality. They see patterns where we see randomness. They find solutions by breaking rules we didn't even know existed. Meanwhile, the crisis was spreading beyond the 3 major powers. Smaller species that had relied on council protection were finding themselves abandoned. Pirates and raiders, no longer held in check by human-coordinated patrol fleets, were attacking colonies with impunity. The Galactic Communication Network, optimized by human technicians over decades, was experiencing cascade failures as overloaded systems crashed. Worlds that had enjoyed instant communication across thousands of light years were suddenly isolated, unable to call for help when disasters struck. On the Vrex military world of War's End, Colonel Drektor faced a rebellion that made no sense according to traditional Vrex military doctrine. The rebels weren't fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the right to govern themselves differently. This was the kind of conflict that human advisors had been particularly good at resolving. They understood that not every war was about conquest, that sometimes people fought for ideas rather than things. But Vrex culture had no framework for dealing with ideological conflicts. Drektor had tried to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force, as Vrex tradition demanded. But the rebels used human-style tactics. They scattered when attacked, struck at unexpected targets, and turned the civilian population against the military through propaganda and political organization. The Vrex were learning that there were types of warfare they had never needed to understand. because humans had always handled those situations for them. In Quillen commercial space, the situation was even worse. Merchant Prince Zeth watched his trading empire collapse as basic systems failed one after another. Inventory management systems that had run automatically for decades were producing impossible results. Shipping schedules that had seemed perfect were leaving cargo stranded in deep space. The Quillens had built their entire civilization around efficiency and profit maximization, but that efficiency had depended on human-designed algorithms that optimized for factors the Quillens didn't understand. Things like worker satisfaction, cultural preferences, and long-term stability. Without human input, Quillen systems were optimizing purely for short-term profit. This was creating cascade failures as overtaxed workers quit, dissatisfied customers canceled contracts, and unstable practices led to accidents and breakdowns. We're receiving reports of food shortages on 17 Quillen worlds, Bora reported. Their distribution systems have completely broken down. How is that possible? Sungwan asked. They have more than enough food production. Production isn't the problem. Distribution is. Their shipping algorithms are designed to maximize profit per cargo unit. But food distribution requires different priorities: speed, reliability, cultural dietary needs. Human logistics coordinators understood this. The Quillen computers don't. The Admiral shook his head in amazement. They're going to starve because their systems are too greedy to deliver food efficiently. The crisis was affecting individual aliens as well as their governments. Dr. Vorth, a Vrex scientist who had worked closely with human researchers, found himself unable to continue his work on quantum metallurgy. The equations he needed were in the human data, but they were based on mathematical concepts that Vrex education had never covered. He had spent weeks trying to understand human theoretical frameworks, but it was like trying to learn a completely different language. Not just different words, but different ways of thinking about reality itself. How did they see these patterns? Vorth asked himself, staring at equations that seemed to solve problems through pure intuition rather than logical deduction. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Alien scientists found themselves unable to complete research that had seemed routine when human colleagues were available. Engineers discovered that systems they thought they understood were actually based on human innovations they had never bothered to study. The galactic economy, which had seemed stable and self-sustaining, was revealing itself to be a complex machine that had required constant human maintenance to function properly. 2 years after their disappearance, humanity returned to galactic space. But they were no longer the same species that had walked out of the council chambers in frustration and anger. Captain Nara Jian stood on the bridge of the Soul, watching through the viewport as her ship emerged from the void between. The vessel moved through space in ways that seemed to mock physics itself, folding distance and bending time around its hull. Behind her, a fleet of similar ships materialized from nothingness, their designs incorporating technologies that the old galaxy couldn't have imagined. "Take us to the coordinates," Nara ordered. "It's time to see what's left." The destination was the former Galactic Council headquarters, now calling itself the Emergency Survival Coalition. The name told its own story. 3 proud civilizations reduced to a desperate alliance, fighting just to survive the collapse of everything they had built. Dr. Dong-Ho Kim worked at a research station that shouldn't have been possible to build. The structure existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, allowing experiments that treated the fundamental forces of reality as raw materials. Through his enhanced perception, a gift of human evolution, during their exile, he could see the quantum threads that connected all things. The galactic communication network is operating at 12% capacity, he reported to the fleet command. Most trade routes have been abandoned. Energy production is down 67% across all monitored systems. Nara nodded grimly. And the alien governments? The Vrex military has fragmented into warlord territories. The Quillen Commercial Federation exists only on paper. Most merchant princes have retreated to fortified homeworlds. The Nethys have lost 11 worlds to spatial anomalies and are retreating to their core systems. It was worse than even the most pessimistic human projections had predicted. Without human intervention, galactic civilization hadn't just declined, it had nearly collapsed completely. The Soul approached the old council station, now renamed Coalition Central. The structure looked different. Damaged sections had been repaired with mismatched materials, and the elegant alien architecture was scarred by the signs of hasty modifications. Ships from dozens of species clustered around the station, but they were mostly small craft, refugees and survivors rather than the grand fleets that had once dominated this space. Coalition Central. This is Captain Narration of the Terran Confederation vessel Sol, requesting permission to dock. The response came quickly, filled with barely controlled desperation. Permission granted immediately, Captain John. Please proceed to docking bay Alpha 7. Coalition leaders are standing by to meet with you. As her ship settled into the docking bay, Nara could see the changes that desperation had brought. The bay was crowded with refugee ships from dozens of species. Maintenance equipment was jury-rigged and patched. Even the air recycling systems showed signs of failing. The delegation that met them at the airlock was a shadow of the proud council that had once ruled the galaxy. Elder Scientist Kix led the group, his energy form dimmed and flickering. Behind him stood War Commander Grexith, his once magnificent armor now practical battlefield gear marked with scars and field repairs. Merchant Prince Zeth brought up the rear, his fine robes replaced with simple functional clothing. But the biggest change was in their attitudes. The arrogance was gone. The condescension had been burned away by 2 years of failure and loss. These were beings who had learned humility the hard way. Captain Jeon, Kix said, his voice carrying none of its former certainty. Thank you for coming. We need help. Nara studied the alien leaders with eyes that could see beyond the visible spectrum, perceiving the stress patterns in their bodies and the desperate hope in their bioenergetic fields. Her enhanced human senses, developed during humanity's forced evolution, read their emotions like open books. I'm not here to help you, she said bluntly. I'm here to meet with the Coalition leadership. We are the Coalition leadership, Grex said, confusion evident in his gravelly voice. No, came a new voice from behind them. We are. The group turned to see Ambassador Hyun-Woo Lee approaching, flanked by representatives from dozens of species. Nara recognized Kathleen leaders, Zephyrian diplomats, Velkari scientists, and others, all species that had once been considered minor powers in the old council system. The Emergency Survival Coalition was formed when the galactic crisis began. Hyun-Woo explained to the former council members. It includes representatives from 87 species. The Vrex, Quillen, and Nethys are members, but they don't lead it. Kix's form flickered with surprise. When did this happen? When you were too busy fighting civil wars and economic collapses to notice, replied Velkari scientist Dr. Thexna. We smaller species learned to work together when it became clear the old powers couldn't protect us anymore. Nara smiled at the irony. The alien species that had once dismissed human diplomatic methods had been forced to adopt them out of sheer necessity. The coalition wasn't ruled by the strongest or the richest, it was governed by consensus and cooperation. The transformation is impressive, Nara said, addressing the entire group. But it's only the beginning. You've learned to work together defensively. Now you need to learn to build together. She gestured and holographic displays materialized around the docking bay, showing images of human space. But these weren't the same images Daeho had shown a year ago. These showed something even more advanced. Cities that existed outside normal space-time, ships that traveled through dimensions that had no names, technologies that used consciousness itself as a power source. This is what we've become, Nara said. Not just technologically advanced, but evolutionarily transformed. We've learned to think in ways that treat reality as malleable, to see connections that span across space and time, to solve problems by changing the fundamental rules that create them. General In-Ho Yang materialized beside her, literally materialized, his consciousness downloading into a temporary physical form. We've moved beyond the old limitations, he said, beyond the need for scarce resources, beyond the constraint of single-dimensional thinking, beyond the assumption that different species must compete rather than synthesize. The alien delegates stared in awe and terror. This wasn't just advancement. This was transformation into something they could barely comprehend. What do you want from us? Zeth asked quietly. Partnership, Hyun-Woo replied. Real partnership. Not the old system where some species ruled and others served, but true cooperation where every civilization contributes its unique strengths to building something none of us could achieve alone. He touched a control, and the displays shifted to show plans for a new kind of galactic civilization, cities that spanned multiple dimensions, trade networks that used quantum entanglement to move goods instantaneously across the galaxy, research projects that would unlock the fundamental secrets of existence itself. "We're calling it the Galactic Confederation," Hyun-woo said. "Every species that joins contributes according to their abilities and receives according to their needs. Decisions are made by consensus among equals. Knowledge is shared freely to advance everyone together." "And if we refuse?" Grexith asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then you continue as you are," Nara said simply. "The Coalition has done good work holding together what remains of the old galaxy. But without fundamental change, you're just managing decline." She gestured to the refugee ships filling the docking bay. "How many more species will go extinct? How many more worlds will be lost to problems you can't solve? How much longer can you hold together without the tools to actually fix what's broken?" Elder Scientist Kik stepped forward, his energy form brightening for the first time in months. "What would membership require?" "Honesty," Hyun-woo said, "about your limitations, your mistakes, your fears. Humility, accepting that other species might know things you don't. And commitment to building something bigger than your own species' narrow interests." "The humans would lead this confederation?" Dr. Thexna asked. "No one would lead it," General In-ho Yang replied. "That's the point. Leadership would be distributed based on expertise and situation. Sometimes humans would coordinate projects, sometimes Keithians, sometimes Quillen merchants or Vrex warriors or Nethys scientists. The goal is synthesis, not domination." Engineer Subin Park stepped forward, her form solid but surrounded by an aura of controlled energy that spoke of technological integration beyond alien understanding. "To demonstrate our commitment, we're prepared to share the Foundation technologies immediately. Not as gifts that create dependence, but as tools that enable independence." She activated a device that created a three-dimensional schematic of a quantum communication array. "This will restore instant communication across the galaxy. But more than that, it will allow every species to contribute to a shared knowledge base where every discovery, every innovation, every solution is available to everyone." The alien leaders exchanged glances. This was beyond anything they had hoped for when they had sent desperate messages into the void, begging for human help. "There's one more thing," Nara said. "The Confederation is already active. 43 species have joined in the past 6 months. They're sharing technologies, solving each other's problems, building new worlds together." 1 year after humanity's disappearance, the Galactic Council chamber stood nearly empty. Chairman Veltar's massive throne sat vacant. He had been overthrown by his own military after losing 12 major worlds to rebels and raiders. The Quillen merchant princes had lost 80% of their wealth and could barely afford to send representatives. Even the mighty Nethys had seen their delegation reduced to a handful of desperate scientists. War Commander Grexith now led what remained of the Virex military. His scarred hide told the story of desperate battles fought with increasingly primitive tactics. Without human strategic advisors, the Vrex had reverted to their ancestral ways. Direct assault, overwhelming force, victory through strength alone. "It wasn't working. We must find the humans," Grexith growled, his massive fists clenching. "Our scouts report strange energy signatures in the deep void regions. They are hiding somewhere, and we will drag them back to serve the Council." Merchant Prince Xeth's mandibles clicked nervously. His once pristine trading outfit was now patched and worn. The Quillen economy had collapsed so completely that even the wealthy were struggling to find basic necessities. Military action would be unwise, Xeth said carefully. "Our preliminary calculations suggest that human space may be larger than we originally estimated." "Much larger." Elder Scientist Kix's energy form flickered weakly. The Nethys had lost 6 worlds to spatial anomalies, and their science remained powerless to stop the destruction. Worse, they had discovered something that shattered their sense of superiority. "I have completed my analysis of the human data chip," Kix announced. "The results are disturbing." "Speak," Grexith demanded. Kix's form shifted to display holographic equations. "These are climate stabilization calculations for the Vrex world of Stone's victory. According to this data, the planet should have experienced catastrophic climate change 15 years ago. The ice caps should have melted completely, causing global flooding." Grexith stared at the display. Stone's victory is perfectly stable. It has been for generations. Yes, Kix said quietly, because human environmental engineers have been secretly managing its weather patterns for 2 decades. They prevented a disaster that would have killed billions of your people, and you never knew it was happening. The chamber fell silent. Grexith's red eyes widened as he processed this information. Show us more, he said. Kix's display shifted to show asteroid tracking data. The Quillen trade world of Prophet's Harbor. According to human calculations, it should have been destroyed by an asteroid impact 8 years ago. The humans detected the threat and used gravitational manipulation to alter the asteroid's course. They never told anyone. Merchant Prince Zeth's clicking grew more frantic. That's impossible. Our sensors would have detected such activities. Would they? Kix asked. Look at this data on viral mutation patterns. The humans have been tracking and preventing 17 different plague outbreaks across Quillen space over the past decade. Each time, they quietly developed treatments and distributed them through medical supply channels, making it appear that local doctors had discovered the cures. The implications were staggering. For decades, the humans had been secretly protecting alien civilizations from threats they hadn't even detected. Climate disasters, asteroid impacts, plague outbreaks, economic collapses, all prevented by quiet human intervention. They were gardeners, Kix said wonderingly. They saw the galaxy as a garden, and they were tending it without telling anyone. Grexth's rage was building. Why? Why hide this from us? Because you wouldn't have let them do it openly, came a new voice from the chamber entrance. All 3 leaders turned to see a figure in a hooded cloak walking toward the speaking platform. The newcomer moved with familiar confidence, and when he pulled back his hood, they saw the face of Ambassador Daeho Kim. Impossible, Grexith snarled. Our sensors show no ships in the system. Daeho smiled. Your sensors show what we want them to show. They always have. He looked around the nearly empty chamber with visible sadness. I've come to deliver one final offer. But first you need to understand what's really happening to your galaxy. Kix's form brightened with desperate hope. You're here to help us. The anomalies, the system failures, the economic collapse, you can fix them. Can we? Daeho asked. Let me ask you something, Elder Kix. When Professor Yunji Kang published her paper on spatial quantum mechanics 3 years ago, what did your scientists call it? Kix's energy form dimmed. Primitive human approximations. Crude mathematical guesswork. And yet those crude approximations could have predicted and prevented every spatial anomaly you've experienced this year. You had the solution. You just thought you were too smart to need it. Daeho turned to Grexith. War Commander, when human advisors suggested new tactical approaches, how did your generals respond? They said human strategies were cowardly, that real warriors fight with honor, not tricks. Those tricks could have saved the 12 worlds you've lost this year. Your enemies are using human tactical manuals they found in abandoned databases. You're losing to your own refused lessons. Finally, he faced Merchant Prince Zeth. And you, Merchant Prince, when human economists warned about cascade failures in profit optimization algorithms, what did the Quillen Commercial Council decide? Zeth's mandibles clicked miserably. That humans didn't understand pure market efficiency. That emotion-based concerns would only reduce profits. Those emotion-based concerns were preventing the exact collapse you're experiencing now. We tried to teach you that long-term stability requires more than short-term optimization. You decided we didn't understand commerce. Daeho walked to the center of the chamber, where the human data chip still sat on the speaking platform, untouched and unexamined. For 50 years, we tried to be partners. We shared our knowledge, our innovations, our solutions. But you never wanted partners. You wanted servants who would solve your problems without questioning your assumptions. Grexth leaned forward on his throne. What do you want, human? Name your price. That's the wrong question, War Commander. The question is, what are you willing to change? Kix's form flickered with confusion. We don't understand. The old council is dead, Daeho said simply. The system where 3 species dominate the galaxy while treating everyone else as inferiors, that's finished. You can't maintain it without us, and we won't support it anymore. Then what do you propose? Zeth asked. Daeho touched a control on his wrist. Around the chamber, holographic displays showed images of human space. Vast regions beyond the edge of mapped territory, filled with ships and stations that dwarfed anything the aliens had built. We propose a new arrangement. A true confederation where all species contribute according to their abilities and receive according to their needs. where decisions are made by consensus, not domination, where knowledge is shared freely, not hoarded for advantage. The displays showed more images: human cities floating in space, energy farms that harvested power from black holes, research stations that bent reality itself to conduct experiments. "This is impossible," Grexith said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it? While you were treating us as junior partners, we were building this. Every human scientist you dismissed was working on projects you couldn't imagine. Every engineer you ignored was developing technologies that make your best achievements look primitive." Deho gestured to the displays. "We didn't just survive our exile. We thrived. We're no longer the same species that left your council. We've become something new." "What? What are you now?" Kix asked, his form flickering with something like fear. "We're what you could have been if you had chosen cooperation over domination. We're what the galaxy could still become if you're willing to change." The three alien leaders stared at the images of human advancement: ships that moved through space in ways that defied known physics, cities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, technologies that treated the laws of nature as suggestions rather than absolute rules. "You're offering us a chance to join this?" Seth asked. "We're offering you a chance to help build it," Deho corrected, "but not as rulers. Not as the species that get to decide how everyone else lives. As partners, equals, contributors to something bigger than any of us alone." "And if we refuse?" Grexith asked. Deho's expression grew sad. "Then you continue on your current path. Your civilizations collapse, your worlds fall to chaos, and you eventually destroy each other fighting over the scraps." He touched his wrist control again, and the display switched to show projections of galactic civilization without human intervention, wars spreading across hundreds of systems, economies collapsing in cascade failures, entire species going extinct as they failed to solve solvable problems. "Choose quickly," Deho said, "because while we've been talking, 3 more spatial anomalies have appeared in Nethys space. The Vrex have lost another world to rebels, and the Quillen food distribution crisis has reached critical levels." He turned to leave, then paused at the chamber doors. "Oh, and one more thing. We're not the only species that left the old system. 47 other civilizations have joined our confederation in the past year. They got tired of being ignored too." The doors closed behind him, leaving the 3 remaining council members alone with the knowledge that their galaxy had already moved beyond them.